Please join me in welcoming to the stage Colonel Joshua McConkey.
All right, thank you, everybody. Let me see if we get this mic up high enough here. I'm not a taller guy, but you guys hear me all right? All right. Well, first off, it's an honor and a privilege to be here with some fellow veterans, men and women that have worn this uniform and served the country, put their lives on the line to defend the greatest democracy in history. Whether you served in time of war or time of peace, you became part of something bigger than yourself. You became part of American history. I want to thank Mr. Bob Luddy for holding this event today. This is a very special event. Seeing all the children come through here, it's very touching, some super cute things there. And I talked with Bob earlier. Mr. Luddy served in the Army, Vietnam veteran, 11 Bravo infantryman. So I learned that about Bob today. Thank you for all your support of your fellow veterans. I want to thank Ms. Greco and the staff here at Holly Springs, Ms. Freeman, my wife, Mrs. Elsa Gonzalez McConkey. She's the weight behind my spear. Everyone here today makes up what I refer to as the weight behind the spear. This is my personal leadership ethos. I've got it on the bottom of my challenge coin, gravitate hastum, gravity of the spear. It serves as a call to action. It's a call to action for all of you. America's best resource. Volunteer, coach, mentor, and lead our next generation of heroes. That generation is right here at Thales Academy. I've worked with special operations and the tip of the spear. As medical director for pararescue operators, the PJs of Combat Search and Rescue, I learned that their special power, their confidence, comes from you, the weight behind their spear. Being part of something bigger than yourself, being part of something that matters, something or someone that matters. Because that has always been America's best resource, the people right here in this room. That's what sets us apart from the rest of the world. That's what makes America special. Nobody understands that better than the men and women who have worn this nation's uniform. And each and every service member, in each of us, there's a tremendous weight behind us. Our teachers, coaches, volunteers, and families. That's why it's so appropriate to hold this event right here at Thales Academy. Because that's why we serve. We serve for one another, the man or woman next to us. It's a bond known by few, but among American service members, understood by many. Only 6% of the American population has served in the military. Less than 1% serves today. It's an honor, and it's a privilege to wear the uniform. Professionally, it's the accomplishment that I am most proud of. Now, everyone here knows who Taylor Swift is, all right? She's the most famous person on planet Earth, just finished her Eras tour. Grossed over $2 billion, the first tour to get over $1 billion. I think Taylor would concede that her accomplishments are nothing compared to the accomplishments of the men and women in this room that have served our country. That's the eras that matter. And the big picture, the only Eras tour that means anything to me is right here in this room. We are a snapshot of American history. So I'm a big history nerd. I want to walk through each of the eras of America's service members and conflicts for my own personal Eras tour. Not showgirls, movie stars, or pop stars. Real heroes. The veterans of the United States military, so I would recognize some of the branches. U.S. Army, let's get some hands up there. Myself included in that one. How about Air Force? I switched branches, so I get to claim that one too. How about Marines? And our Navy veterans. We got some Coast Guard. We got a Coastie in here? Okay, and then this next one, the U.S. Space Force. All right, the new one. You know, that's the spin-off from the U.S. Air Force. So I worked at the VA hospital in Durham for several years. I was privileged to care for veterans who served before me and alongside me. I heard incredible stories, each generation's story. Each era had unique experiences that shaped our nation. As these years roll by, the older generations slowly fade away. Just like General MacArthur said on his retirement speech, old soldiers never die, they simply fade away. Caring for veterans throughout my career as a doctor has been very fulfilling. I recall many memorable experiences, and I want to share a memory from each of those eras. I had the incredible honor of caring for a World War II veteran when I was a resident physician. I was moonlighting in an urgent care, and towards the end of a shift, I had an elderly gentleman come in with some random knee pain. You know, I figured it'd be something easy, run-of-the-mill, maybe some osteoarthritis. I figured it would just, take a couple of minutes. And as he sat down and started telling me some stories, he injured that knee on his second jump. I paused, I just looked at that date of birth and put 2 and 2 together with some math and asked him a little bit more detailed questions. He was indeed in part, so for those that are big history buffs, anybody that followed Band of Brothers, this gentleman jumped on Normandy. He was part of the 506th Infantry Regiment, not Easy Company, but Fox Company. He landed on Normandy. He was part of Operation Market Garden, had jumped into Holland where he injured his knee, and this man served at the Siege of Bastogne. And for me being prior Army, that history, those stories, these are the men that were surrounded by Germans in freezing temperatures with no cold weather gear, running out of food, very little ammunition, with just true guts and determination, refusing to surrender. The German commander sent in a message and said, "This is your last chance. Surrender or you're going to be annihilated." And in the most American response you can imagine, that American general sent back a response, and just the last word, "Nuts." Man, you talk about some amazing history. This veteran's eyes welled up as he recounted the stories. I got the sense that he hadn't talked about this in a very, very long time. I sat there mesmerized, just listening. I think he was impressed that I even knew anything about the history. The urgent care had long closed, but I didn't care. I did a procedure. I pulled some fluid off his knee. It was a nasty, bloody effusion. And so I called up an orthopedic surgeon on call at a local hospital. I sent him in for further care. As another cool history tidbit, I grew up in a very small town of western Nebraska. And Alliance, Nebraska is where the glider pilots trained that dropped those guys on Normandy. Our next era of combat veterans fought in what came to be known as the Forgotten War, the Korean War. I might age myself a little bit here, but who remembers the TV show MASH? Get some hands up. All right. Great show. I'll never forget the episode where Father McConkey did an emergency tracheostomy in the field with a pen. Does anybody remember that episode? I think that's why I became a doctor, actually, watching that episode. My chaplain in Iraq, Jim Higgins, had some wild stories. There's one story that he tells. He was driving from Balad from one side to the other and was dodging mortars in his Humvee. About 3 or 4 of them dropped in left, right. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for chaplains. As a maintenance man in a small rural hospital, so I worked there when I was in high school and college, I worked with a man named Clarence Jerky. Clarence had long retired from his regular job. He was working as the groundskeeper for the hospital. Clarence was this tiny, little wiry vet. He was about this tall, and when he had his big John Deere hat on, he stood about that tall. I spent most of my summer working with him outside. Clarence was an old crotchety veteran. He was a little bit crusty, a little bit short, trying to teach me a few things. He softened up after a few weeks. He taught me some very valuable lessons about integrity, hard work, and what service meant to him. He told me of his days in the Signal Corps in the U.S. Army. He was running communication wires from bunkers on the front lines, and the Korean and Chinese were peppering them with artillery rounds cutting the lines. Without that communication, the commanding general wasn't able to make decisions that he needed, and it was risking cutting off men, Clarence and his men, which would have meant certain death. Clarence would run those lines, jumping from trench to trench, and running along those same lines were some North Korean soldiers. Clarence told me a harrowing story of his hand-to-hand combat with one North Korean. He showed me the scars on his hands and his forearms. And with a little, I'd ask him some stories, like, hey, well, what happened to the other guy? And with a little subtle grin and just these steely eyes, he said, only one of us walked out of that trench alive, and I'm standing here, ain't I? Clarence was very small in stature, but he exuded character and integrity, and the thing that he was most proud of was his family. And I never forgot those lessons. I mentioned the TV show MASH earlier. So although it was scripted, it was taking place during the Korean War. It was a thinly veiled critique of the Vietnam War that was raging at the time. That brings us to our next era. As a kid growing up, so I was born in the 70s, 1977. I grew up watching Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, Apocalypse Now. Read every book, all the documentaries I could get a hold of. And I always, when I speak, I always ask if there's Vietnam veterans present. So if there's any Vietnam veterans here today, please stand up. I want to recognize you. And I know Mr. Luddy won. Let me see our Vietnam veterans. I'm going to give you guys a round. I want to thank you for your service. You guys lived in an era that didn't have the weight of America behind you. And when people ask me, what does it mean to be the weight behind the spear? Ask these gentlemen what it was like to serve without that weight behind their spear. They were treated horribly coming home. I had a much different response when I returned home from Iraq. And I just always recognize them, and I want them to know that I served because of you. So thank you. One of my most memorable patients ever that I cared for was a Vietnam War veteran, and this was at the VA hospital in Fayetteville. Now, this story is incredible. So I introduced myself to this gentleman. He told me he was born and raised in Cuba. So my wife, Elsa, has Cuban ancestry. I ingratiated myself to him very quickly. Bienvenido al Departamento de Emergencia. Yo soy Dr. McConkey, ¿cómo puedo ayudarle? Welcome to the emergency department. I'm Dr. McConkey. Can I help you? So I think he realized I was trying. I speak very little, but I've got my spiel when I walk into a room. So this man served as a major in the United States Army. He served multiple tours in Vietnam. But before his service in the Army, he took part in the Bay of Pigs invasion. He was part of the CIA-led operation to overthrow Fidel Castro in April of 1961. He told me that the entire event, it was a complete debacle from the start. It lacked planning, and he felt that it was clearly set up to fail. He was on a small boat with several other soldiers as they're landing on the beach, gets shredded by machine gun fire. He's the only one that survived. He bails out of the boat and swims ashore. Now, we know now that it was set up to fail. The CIA attempted to trap our young president, John F. Kennedy, into invading Cuba, but JFK didn't take the bait. This fiasco angered President Kennedy, and he made the comment that he was going to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces. It left an impression on President Kennedy, one of distrust of the CIA and that military-industrial complex. And this likely contributed to his steadfast resistance to launching nuclear weapons during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of 1962. So you talk about some life-changing events. Like, this man lived those events. So there are actual recordings for the Joint Chiefs of Staff begging the president to launch nuclear weapons. President Kennedy said, "You guys are crazy," and he gets up and walked out of the room. That is how close we were to nuclear annihilation. So this Army veteran and prior member of Brigada 2056 was literally at the Bay of Pigs invasion. After the total failure, he spent 3 days wandering through swamps. He became delirious with dehydration and was then captured. After enduring a year of torture, he was released and sent to the United States to spread communism but clearly just defected. Now, there was a lot more to that story that he could not share because that was clearly classified, but I had his military record and health record right in front of me, and it was legit. So he retired a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. I do not know a single other Cuban-born national that participated in the Bay of Pigs that passed security clearances to serve as an officer in the U.S. Army. Just an amazing story. So Cold War era veterans. That's a big era right there, and pretty much includes everybody from the 50s all the way to the 1990s. This era generated some of the best spy movies and thrillers. Personally, my favorite was Hunt for Red October. I worked with an old doc early in my career. So straight out of residency, this guy had been practicing medicine for 20 years, and he was a prior Navy P-3 pilot. He was a sub-hunter. Now, he was part of the real-life Hunt for Red October. He's dropping acoustic buoys, tracking all these Russian submarines, all these cat and mouse games between US and Russia, except the real-world consequences were potential nuclear war. The Cold War spanned the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way up to 1990. Even now, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Those pesky Russian leaders, one could argue that Putin's Russia poses more of a risk to us now, threatening European security. And his actions have led to over 400,000 deaths in Europe. During Putin's time in the KGB, if you roll back these years back to 1986, there's whispers of a meeting between him and Saddam Hussein. Saddam played a pivotal role in our next era. Once the Cold War ended, Soviet Union folded, and the Berlin Wall fell, we transitioned to the Gulf War very quickly. It was less than a year. The Gulf War was the first war I actively remember as a child. I was in middle school. I remember distinctly Mrs. Michaels walking into the class, stopping school, turning on a TV, and we watched the invasion of Iraq live on TV. The preceding weeks were 24/7 coverage of military operations, meticulously described by these CNN reporters and some retired generals. It was the first live TV coverage of war in history. I've cared for many Gulf War veterans through the years since then. I've seen a lot of Gulf War syndrome, respiratory issues from the burning oil fields, the burn pits, depleted uranium. But even more important, it was these senior NCOs, these Gulf War veterans, that shaped who I am as a leader. And that's what pulls this all together. Every era, every generation passes that knowledge on to the next. And for me, as I joined in 2000, and all these crusty Gulf War veterans. So as a very green butter bar, all right, that's what they call second lieutenants. A second lieutenant is the most dangerous thing in the United States Army, if you didn't know. It was these senior leaders that taught me about professionalism, respect, integrity, and how to lead. So lesson one, always listen to your senior NCOs. I knew this butter bar who had been in the military for a hot second. They were direct commission. They thought they were pretty tough and ready for their first Army physical fitness test. Now, the first sergeant pulls them aside and says, "Sir, are you sure you don't want to do a diagnostic?" Well, you need to listen. So this butter bar was me, didn't listen. I failed my first PT test. I missed it by a few push-ups. The most embarrassing moment of my entire career. And guess what? I listened to Sergeant Solomon from then on. I busted my tail for a few months and hit that perfect 300 for the 9 years of my entire career. The next era, the global war on terror, comes all around that first full circle to me with the Iraq War, Afghanistan. Those lessons learned from those Gulf War veterans were more critical than I ever would have thought, because less than a year and a half later, a group of terrorists led by Osama bin Laden orchestrated the most devastating attack on American soil. They murdered 3,000 Americans in New York City, Washington, D.C., and on Flight 93. Within a few years, I found myself flying medevac missions in Iraq. I was a battalion flight surgeon, taking care of men and women injured at the point of injury, and I did one air assault It was the scariest thing I have ever done. Nothing will battle harden you faster than carrying body bags off a helicopter. I take tremendous pride in serving and taking care of the men and women that have laid down their lives and injured themselves for this country. But it leaves scars, scars that only other veterans can truly understand. So I appreciate all of you being here today. I know it means a lot to me, your families, and our community. So today, as a recent commander, I just finished my command tour at Andrews Air Force Base. I'm that old crotchety colonel now. I'm responsible for teaching the next generation, our next era of heroes, giving them the tools necessary to defend this great nation. As we hand them the keys, it's important more now than ever to be the weight behind their spear. I'm incredibly proud of what my team accomplished recently during that Israeli-Hamas conflict. It was my people with boots on the ground there responding, and they performed admirably. I have full faith that they will pay those lessons forward to the next era of heroes. For all those veterans out there, I want to let you know, your service hasn't ended. Your watch is not over. Your nation and your community still need you. For those that are on the retired reserve lists, who's on the retired reserve list out there? Who's our retirees? Right? You can still get called up. You can. I served with Colonel Killingsworth in Iraq. At over age 65, they pulled him back for retirement and sent him to Afghanistan. So this is my call to action for you. Volunteer, coach, mentor this next generation. Their success is our success. I know you won't let America fail. History lives on through you. We are all blessed to be standing here on this Veterans Day. So thank you for your service to our nation. And thank you for your contributions to history. Whether your era spanned 1, 2, or even more of these conflicts. We didn't do it for the recognition. We did it for each other. May God bless you and your families. May He bless this great state of North Carolina, and may He continue to bless these United States of America. Thank you.